Do you have any tips for making sure songs don't get too muddled and parts don't overwhelm each other? What I did for a long time is I challenged myself to not create any songs with more than 50 tracks. Basically what that did is by doing that and then going and studying some of my favorite arrangements, I would definitely listen to stuff from 70s, 80s, 90s where they actually had that limit, where a lot of those guys couldn't record on more than 24 to 48 tracks. It makes you think more about what's the purpose here. Is this actually necessary? For instance, I can play, and I love playing actually cluttered chords a lot. It's fun. So like for instance, really though, in order to just get that color, I can take out the second. I could take that out. I could just make, really the only necessary chords here are the 5th and the 7th. You already know essentially what the chord is just by that. You don't need that. You could just go, and you already understand what the chord is, right? And then what you can think is, okay, how do I want to disperse the chord, right? What plays what? Should all of that be on a piano? Should I let the bass only have? Sometimes it's a good idea to just have the bass take the bass note, right? Don't let the piano play the bass note unless you want to add a certain amount of grit. There's no like rules. You've just got to be able to develop an ear for it. But you could have bass down here. Let's just pretend this is bass, and then piano could just play. Again, pretend this is actually like a bass. That progression probably makes more sense here. You can have a lot of ideas and add them on top of stuff, but eventually you have to go back and you have to go, is this serving the song or is it just harming it? What I will do a lot of the times is I will actually solo elements and see what I'm feeling and what I feel like is just, even if I love the sound, even if I love that added thing that I did, if I don't feel like it's helping the song, but instead getting in the way, I will just I'll mute it. I'll get rid of it. All that extra ear candy and whatnot sometimes is nice, but a lot of times you'll realize this isn't necessary. It doesn't need to be here. Honestly, beyond just studying like those old songs from 70s through 90s, 60s through 90s, really, but even video game music does it. Old video game music, those people had to figure out how to arrange with a very, very limited amount of sounds that they could use at once. If you go listen to any music from the chiptune days, from like NES or Genesis or something like that, and if you sit there and really study what they're doing, it's really remarkable how they are handling every sound. Every sound is very intentional. I think that's the very important thing, is be very intentional with the arrangement. People way back when they were working on music, right? Let's just say Earth, Wind & Fire, for instance. Any of those arrangements, you will notice that there's a lot of intentionality. And that intentionality is because rather than, while it's fantastic, the incredible creative freedom we have nowadays with computers being able to change and adjust anything at our own pace at any point. Back in the day, you had to write down the score for the brass. You didn't have all these synths and all this quick, being able to maneuver stuff. So you had to be very intentional about how you arrange things. You had to know, okay, this is going to be here, this is going to be here. They really had to get in the zone of knowing, okay, this is how this is going to make sense, so this isn't getting in the way of this, etc., etc. And as a result, you will notice that a lot of those arrangements, especially back then, again, pointing to Earth, Wind & Fire, Michael Jackson, really listen to any great pieces from the 70s or 80s, you'll just notice that the arrangements, they're very, very intentional. Because they had a limited number of tracks, they had limited time in the studio. You had to be more intentional. So I think that's the big thing with arranging and making sure things don't get muddled. Be very intentional about everything. Does this matter? Is this getting in the way? Can I get rid of this? You know what I mean? Because that was something I struggled with for a long time, for sure. There's fantastic examples. Let's look at Link's Awakening. Okay, so here's a good one. Waking Up at Terrence's House. Both of those sounds are patches in Omnisphere, by the way. So, notice something here. You understand the melody, you understand the chord structure being played. So, right, it sounds like... Right? So you understand that these are the chords. But never in that whole song will you hear all of those notes played at the same time. What they're doing, and this is part of the limit back in the day. Now, of course, this is the new version, so of course they didn't have to do this, but I'm actually glad they stayed true to the original arrangement. But back in the day on like the Game Boy, you could not play more than like 3 notes at a time. So that, I couldn't play that on a Game Boy. So what they would do to make things really interesting, what they do here, instead of playing it like... Instead of doing that, what they do is... It's all arpeggiations. You understand the chord just based on the fact that it's playing through them arpeggiated like that. Listen again. It's honestly brilliant arranging based on the limits that they had. And you understand exactly what the song is doing, and it never has to play one actual chord the entire time. And that's how they got around. You'll hear that a lot in a lot of old chiptune music. That's another very simple one. You've got those 2 notes. That's it. That's all it is. Hopefully that very long-winded answer gives you a good example of how less is very, 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 very often more.